Wow, that was some great music, right? Anyway, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. As you can see, I'm experiencing a wonderful vacation here in the Caribbean. No, not really. But I needed something to kind of get me out of the gloom of the Northeast right now. Anyway, I'm Lee Haber on behalf of the American Booksellers Association and Publishers Lunch. Welcome to the Buzz Books Editors and Authors panel. I've had the good fortune to be in and around books and authors for my entire career, and I really want to thank Michael and Robin and the entire Pub Lunch team for including me in this wonderful event. So many great books to talk about, and authors, editors, just heroes. And thank you to our editors and publishers for participating in Buzz Books as well as this panel, and for their generous donation of 25 galleys for 25 lucky booksellers. Thank you. Also, one note, housekeeping note, be sure to download the free Buzz Books 2024 Spring Summer Sampler with substantial excerpts of these 5 authors as well as many others. We'll post the Buzz Books download link in the chat throughout the evening. I do want to thank Pub Lunch for interrupting my so-called vacation, because we're all coming back into connection again, and it's so lovely. And so I really do cherish this opportunity to connect with all of you. So thank you. And before I introduce our first panelists, however, may I say on behalf of Michael Cater and the Pub Lunch team the following. The focus of Buzz Books is always on authors, but for just a minute tonight, we'd like to ask for a round of virtual applause and community gratitude for Robin Delabeau, who has led the Buzz Books program since its creation over 12 years and will be retiring from Publishers Marketplace at the end of this month. Very sad to lose you, Robin, but hopefully you're going on to incredible things. Through the Buzz Books samplers and virtual panels, Robin has helped bring attention and readers to well over 1,000 deserving authors and built a receptive and appreciative audience of tens of thousands of booksellers, librarians, influencers, and readers. Thank you, Robin, from all of us and for me. Okay, so without further ado, the first book up is one I'm really excited about. It's called Long After We Are Gone, and it's by Terah Shelton Harris, who is an author, collection development librarian, and former freelance writer who now writes novels. Her work has appeared in Catapult, Women's Health, Every Day with Rachel Ray, Backpacker, and many more. Her first novel, One Summer in Savannah, was a Target Book Club pick and a Library Reads pick. And I just want to add that there's a killer first sentence in this book, which is, no pun intended, quote, really, King Solomon died before his heart stopped beating. I mean, that got my heart beating. As we said, it's her second novel. She lives in Alabama. And I hope that in her conversation with Erin McClary, her editor, she will reveal why her dedication is the following: Bangkok has us now. Okay, so before I introduce them, Erin is an editor of fiction and nonfiction at Sourcebooks. Prior to becoming an editor, she worked in brand and digital marketing across an array of consumer brands. So turn on your microphones, first editor and author, and cameras to come onto the digital stage, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. And hello, Terah. It's so nice to see you. My name is Erin McClary, and I am so fortunate to be Terah's editor at Sourcebooks. If you have not read her first book, One Summer in Savannah, I cannot recommend it enough. Yes, of course, I am biased, but Terah's words melt through you like a hot knife through butter. But tonight we're here to talk about Terah's next book, Long After We Are Gone. Terah, can you give a quick introduction to the book and your inspiration for it?
Yeah, so Long After We're Gone is a powerful and emotional family saga. That's what I've been saying, about 4 siblings who, after their father dies, is forced to return home to save their ancestral land, their home, the kingdom, and land, which consists of 200 acres, from being sold out from underneath them to a developmental company. And this book is inspired by the real life story of Melvin Davis and LaCurtis Reels of North Carolina, who went to jail for 8 years after refusing to leave the land that their great grandfather had purchased a century prior after it was sold out from underneath them. And their story is being told in this amazing Amazon Prime documentary titled Silver Dollar Road. But I first heard of their story years ago on an article after I read an article. And I remember being so frustrated and shocked that not only had I not heard of or what happened to them, but not only that, I have never heard of air property before. And after much research, I discovered that it is a problem that no one's really talking about. And so that's why I wanted to write a book like Long After. But Long After We're Gone is also about, as much as it's about saving ancestral land, it's also about intergenerational trauma and what is passed down from generation to generation. You know, this book very centers around responsibilities and the connections that comes with love and family. And each of the siblings have a difficult journey to embark on when they come home to not only save their ancestral land, but to save themselves. And so it is about breaking that intergenerational trauma that, unbeknownst to them, that they're linked to.
That's something I love so much about your books is you cover so many timely, deeply relevant themes that are affecting people in real life, but they don't get a lot of attention in fiction. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what air property is and why you chose to write about it.
Okay, yeah. So after the Reconstruction, formerly enslaved Black Americans began buying land. And a lot of that land was the land that they had previously worked. But unfortunately, people did not like that. So laws were created to dispossess them of their land. And so because a lot of these formerly enslaved Americans, especially particularly in the South, could not trust white courts, land, in the case of the Solomon siblings and so many real life Black families today, land was passed down without a will, making it air property. And air property is a form of ownership in which descendants inherit interest in the land. It's very similar to holding like stock in a company. One of the problems with that is after multiple generations, there can be a bunch of heirs for one particular acre of land or acres of land. And so sometimes in some states, it only takes one of those heirs to sell in order for their families to lose all of the land. Another problem with air property is it does not come with a clear title. And so without a clear title, that makes it very vulnerable to businesses and corporations and governments to take the land from them. But without a clear title, it's also difficult to prove ownership. And without ownership, you can't get loans, you can't apply for grants, you can't get mortgages. You know, it's estimated that tens of thousands of Hurricane Katrina victims were unable to prove ownership of their air property. So that made a lot of the FEMA, all the millions of dollars that was made available to them from FEMA and made it ineligible to them because they could not prove ownership. So one of the reasons why another reason why I want to write this book was to kind of shed some light on air property, but to also, you know, highlight that some of these Reconstruction laws are still in the books now, and they're still continuing to dispossess families of their land.
This book is told through the perspectives of each of the 4 Solomon siblings, and these characters come to life on the page to the point where I'm not convinced these are not real people that you've written about. And you did share with me that some of the characters are based loosely on people you do know, and I would love for you to introduce each of the 4 siblings and explain how you came up with these characters.
Yeah, we take from life. Well, I do anyway. As a writer, I tend to take from life. There's no one character that's based on someone, but a lot of the characteristics are based on people that I know. And so the Solomon siblings, as I mentioned, they have to return home to save their ancestral land, but they also have to save themselves. They are very much far from perfect. They're very flawed individuals. And so you have Junior, who's the oldest, who is technically, now that his father has passed away, he is technically now responsible for the land, but he's never saw eye to eye with his father. And so he never really wanted anything to do with the land. So as soon as he got a chance, he got married, he moved away. But Junior's bigger secret is that he is secretly in love with another man. And then you have Mance, who's the second son, who is more like King, their father, who stayed at home, who's running a workshop, who loves and values the land. But he has a problem with his temper that has led to multiple incarcerations. He also suffers from anxiety. And he just recently found out that his newborn son was deaf. And so he's having a hard time grappling all those things at the exact same time. And then you have the oldest daughter, Cece, who very much like Junior, never really wanted anything to do with the land. So she graduated from high school and she became a lawyer in New York City. And she's willing to do just about anything to not return home. And that includes embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from her law firm. And so when she returns home, she has the stigma of that hanging over her, but she also is faced with the love of her life, who she basically just walked away from. And then last, you have Toki, who's the youngest daughter, who's been grappling with this sense of never really feeling at home in place with that family. And so she uses these self-destructive manners to kind of fill that void. But one of the things that they don't realize is that all their struggles that they have feel very individual to them. But what they don't know is that their struggles are tied to the land and to the people that came before them. And that's the intergenerational trauma part that they just had really no idea, and they are forced to confront with and to try to break when they return home.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the settings of your books. One Summer in Savannah obviously takes place in Savannah, Georgia. Long After We Are Gone takes place in the fictional town of Diggs, North Carolina. And at this point, Southern fiction has kind of become its own subgenre. But Southern fiction goes far beyond a book merely being set in the South. What are some characteristics that you equate with Southern fiction, and how do those play out in your book?
For me, it's about the significance and the focus on family. For my book inspiration for Long After We're Gone, it was one of my favorite Southern fiction books, As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. And that tells a story of the Brunton family's plight to fulfill their mother's dying wish, which is to be buried in Jefferson, Mississippi. And in order to tell that story, Faulkner used 15 POVs to tell that story. And each one of the POVs offered like insight, not only into the plight, but also to the character, who they were. And so I don't think that you would have allowed me to have 15 POVs in this book. So I settled for 4, which was a challenge, but we did it. But what I really pulled from that was the Southern focus on family and the togetherness. And I think that really added an extra special layer to the story. And so in Long After, you have the overarching story of the siblings returning home to save their ancestral land, but you also have this intergenerational trauma that they have to overcome within themselves. And so I think that kind of added an extra layer to the story as well.
Thank you for not writing 15 POVs. I think my head would have exploded. As we talked about earlier, you explore a lot of different themes in your books. Long After We're Gone touches on the power of family and letting the detriment of miscommunication and the lessons and legacies that are passed on to our children. What do you want for readers to take away from this story? And what do you want them to keep thinking about days after they've finished reading?
I think it's more of a call to action. So in my author's note of this, and even right now, it's more of a call to action that if you have or suspect that you have family land or think that you may have family land, please talk to the elders in your family while you still can and ask them questions. Speak to your grandparents, your mother, your father, your sister, their aunts, their uncles, and ask them questions like, where is the family land? How many acres is it? Whose name is it in? Is it heir property? That's a very important question. Another important question is, are there any other potential, or could there be any other potential heirs to the land? That's something that's not talked about. Are there any estranged siblings that we don't know about? That's another big one. The largest one is, who is paying the taxes on it, and are the taxes current? In my research, I've discovered that so much land, not just heir property, but just land in general, is lost due to unpaid taxes. And so please, if you think that you particularly have heir property, please begin to ask those questions. And if you think you do, and you know you have heir property, please begin to take the steps to protect your land. And by doing that, you can speak to a real estate attorney in regards to your options, writing a will and making sure all the taxes are current. So it's more of a call to action, because people are losing their land every day. And I want to make sure that people are conscious and aware of this, because in the case of the Solomon siblings, and even the case of Melvin Davis and the Curtis Reels, the inspiration for this story, it was sold out from underneath them just because they did not know. So ask questions, especially the elders, while they're still here.
Great stuff. So important. So one last question. Can you answer Lee's question about the dedication?
So I laughed so hard when she asked that question. So the dedications to my husband. So we love this movie, these trilogies called the Hangover movies. I'm so embarrassing to be saying this. So the Hangover movies. And in I think the second Hangover movie, it was set in Bangkok. And so there's a line where they're looking for their friend. And he says, oh, Bangkok has him now, because Bangkok is such a huge city. And he says, Bangkok has him now. So anytime we lose something in the house or we lose something, we make a comment and just say, Bangkok has it now. You know, it's just like this inside family thing that I thought no one would ever ask me about. So now all of you guys know me and my husband's inside secret.
You know what? It makes us love you even more. The book is so good. And congratulations to both of you. It's
Thank you.
An amazing book. It's got like, I'm really inspired by the idea that you were inspired by Faulkner and so many others. So many great characters, Shakespearean, you know, it's just really good. So
thank you.
Congratulations to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're making a real switch here. To the switch, and the switch is by Lily Samson. Jeremy Orton is her editor at Pamela Dorman Books. I love Pam Dorman. She's just, you know, got such a great imprint going. And this book is, suburban noir. That was a phrase I guess I was unfamiliar with before. There's tension from page one. You know, it's just sizzling. You just love it. So anyway, I'm going to read from the script that I've been provided, but I just wanted to add that in. You know, very sexy, very, you know, you just want to keep going. You keep turning the pages. Lily Samson studied English at Oxford University and works in publishing. And by the way, her name is a pseudonym. So we don't know where she works in publishing in London or what her real name is. She divides her time between London and Paris. Another intriguing fact. Okay, The Switch is her US adult debut. Okay, Jeremy Orton joined Pamela Dorman Books in 2015 after working at Oxford University Press. A senior editor, she acquires predominantly high concept domestic thrillers, dark psychological suspense, mystery, and some crime, as well as general upmarket commercial fiction. She's edited best-selling and critically acclaimed works by authors Sarah Pierce, Sherry LaPena, Richard Osman, J. Ryan Stradell, and B. Satan, among others. And I just want to say one more thing. Apparently, there's been a preempt. So there's going to be a TV or a film version of this novel. Sony is the person who captured it. Okay, over to you guys, and thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks to everyone for tuning in this evening. Lily, are you here?
I'm here. Sorry, I'm just getting...
There you
go. I'm here.
Amazing.
Sorry for that.
Lily, I'm so thrilled to be talking to you about your novel. And I have to start by reading Chris Whitaker's excellent alliterative blurb. He calls it shocking, seductive, and scandalous, a page-turning thriller, which I think completely nails it. You know, I remember when this came in on submission, it was a Tuesday, and your agent said that she'd sent it out the previous Friday to the UK, and by that Tuesday, she'd already had an offer in hand. So needless to say, I sped through it, flipping the pages as fast as possible. So since The Switch is on sale in May, for anyone who's unfamiliar, could you give a brief overview about what it's about and talk a bit about your inspiration for the book?
Yep, thank you for having me here this evening. So The Switch is a domestic thriller about two couples who play a dark, twisted game of love and obsession. It centres on a couple called Eleanor and Adam who move to a quiet suburb in London, and there they become friends with a very glamorous and wealthy couple called Sophia and Finn. And then Sophia suggests to Eleanor a very indecent proposal. She suggests that they swap their partners in the dark at night without the men knowing, and that they'll do this by mimicking every pattern and detail of each other's behavior and routine, from the shampoo they use to the washing powder to the right underwear and so on. And so this quite wild and outrageous scenario results in a sexual awakening for Eleanor, but then she soon begins to realize that there's something far more sinister unfolding in the background, and she needs to find out what that is. And I was inspired by numerous books and films when I was writing it. In the long term, I was very inspired by Dangerous Liaisons. I love the film with Glenn Close and John Malkovich, which is based on the 18th century novel By Lacoste, which is about aristocrats playing manipulative games of love and deceit and lies and so on. I'm also a big Hitchcock fan. I wanted to kind of imbue the book with that classy, stylish energy that you get in a film like Notorious. Cary Grant was an inspiration for Finn, one of the characters. And in Notorious, you get that fantastic, passionate obsession occurring in a dangerous situation. So I wanted that kind of atmosphere. And then about 3 years ago, I started really enjoying and reading domestic thrillers, which I hadn't done before. I'd never really been into, say, spy thrillers or car chase thrillers and so on. I really liked the way the genre evolved into something more psychological. I enjoyed books by Alice Feeney and B.A. Paris, Ashley Audrain and Louise Candlish. I really admired the page-turning energy, the cleverly constructed plots, the twists, and the fact that they explored female characters often with a lot of darkness and depth. So they were also very inspiring.
Well, speaking of kind of the dark side of human nature, though there's definitely lies and secrets and ill intentions here, The Switch also has some steamy moments as well. For me, I thought the inclusion of these scenes really, beyond forwarding the plot, really offset some of the darker moments in the novel. I know there's sort of a subgenre of sexy thrillers. I remember PW did a roundup of some a year ago that included Megan Miranda's The Perfect Stranger, Tammy Hoag's Deeper Than Dead, and others. Can you talk about how you were incorporating these sexy scenes without kind of going over the top, and if there are any recent novels in this space that you particularly enjoy?
Well, in 2019, I was like really struggling financially, and I heard this really amusing rumor about some highbrow literary authors who were writing erotica in their spare time, moonlighting as erotica writers and self-publishing on Amazon in order to survive. So I took their advice and I attempted to do this, but I think the gold rush was over by then because I didn't really make a lot of money, but I do think I learned how to develop and hone and craft a good sex scene. And I think sex scenes work well when there's plenty of plot foreplay, so to speak, so that there's a real frisson between two characters that builds in little gestures and nuances and glances before it breaks into a full scene. I think it's probably easier to write a dramatic scene that's very intense and that's whether it's a love scene or whether it's a scene of jeopardy where there's plenty of fear. I think often strong emotions are easier to convey than, say, writing a very subtle domestic scene where you're trying to capture like an everyday conversation with a sense of menace. But I think in The Switch, the sex scenes are particularly interested and layered and complex to write because Eleanor and Sophia are playing such a dangerous game and the stakes are so high. When Eleanor creeps into Sophia's house at night to secretly sleep with Finn, that's the Cary Grant character, she has to be so careful. So she has to creep up the stairs and tiptoe up the stairs, and she has to remember which of the stairs squeaks and she mustn't tread on that. She mustn't make any noise. She's got to be completely silent because if Finn hears her voice, he's going to recognize her. The scene takes place in the pitch black so that there's this loss of inhibition, a complete freeing up of her sexual energies which have been very repressed up until that point. And obviously it's a very controversial scene with some very difficult moral issues. So Ellen is also grappling with these, with guilt and confusion and uncertainty. So there's a really rich range of emotions underpinning the scene. And they also raise the tension in the plot, because how long can they get away with these swaps for? And actually, are the men really ignorant of what's going on, or are they actually playing them? There's a lot of ambiguity that begins to creep in as to whether the men are pretending or not. And I think as for other examples of books, I would say Tammy Hoeg's Deeper Than the Dead is a great example. And I'm really delighted that she's given The Switch a really fantastic blurb for the cover. And another good example might be Verity by Colleen Hoover, because it's this mix of a dark, sexy love affair and then a plot line involving dark secrets in the past that gradually come to light.
That's great. And on a related note, something that really drew me to your book was how you played with themes of female sexuality and empowerment. And I'm curious, how were you thinking about these when you wrote the book?
So the switches create an awakening in Eleanor, because she's in a fairly conventional relationship with Adam, and it's a very stagnant relationship. It's not abusive, but she's not treasured, and she's definitely not being her best self. So although Sophia has quite dark intentions, she does actually empower Eleanor through this situation. At the beginning of the book, Eleanor's quite passive and quiet in her friendships and in her relationship with Adam and with Finn. And then she begins to take on a lot more agency. So it gives her the chance to achieve what she desires, this extraordinary sexual experience, and to also escape this relationship with her partner that is basically deadwood. But as the book goes on, she learns that Sophia and Finn's past is not quite what it seems. So she has to become a lot more engaged and active, because she becomes obsessed with investigating their past and finding out who they really are, which means that in the second half of the book, the thriller elements creep in a lot more.
I think Eleanor's trajectory is especially interesting because even though she becomes empowered through her friendship with Sophia, she really has to reckon with the breakdown of their friendship as she ultimately loses trust in Sophia as time goes on, which I thought was really curious and really well done. The Switch definitely plays on moral dilemmas, and I think each of the characters faces tough decisions. It's easy to align your empathy with Elena as the reader, and even to point your finger at Sophia for what she does. But I know you wanted to add depth to their relationship and also to the men as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I grew up watching sexy thrillers such as Fatal Attraction, another Glenn Close classic. And I really enjoyed it. But around that time, female antagonists tended to be caricatures. I didn't want to create a female villain who was simply there to be sinister for the sake of the plot. I wanted her to be a really rich and complex character, and she has an unusual backstory and trauma in her past, which are shaping her actions in the present. Sophia and Finn are like the aristocrats in Dangerous Liaisons, and they think they can control other people, and then they gradually learn that life isn't that simple. Ultimately, they're bound by trauma, and I wanted the reader to be blindsided by the final twists in the book and to lose a sense of who they're supposed to feel empathy for, to feel empathy for everyone, no matter what mistakes they've made, so that there's not a clear sense of who's good and who's bad. And again, this was something that this was another influence of Dangerous Liaisons in the book, because I was fascinated when I was reading about Christopher Hampton, who wrote the play and the screenplay for the film. And he spoke about how the book explores love as a disruptive force. And he pointed out that often love is redemptive or it's a resolution, but in Dangerous Liaisons, it's disruptive, it's purifying, it shakes the characters up. I mean, eventually it destroys them in that film. So without wanting to reveal any of the big twists at the end of The Switch, Sophia is very manipulative, but as the book goes on, you learn that ultimately she's taken extreme action and she's motivated by love ultimately.
Okay, last question, and I have to ask, who do you think is the readership for this book?
So I think that readers who enjoyed, say, Samantha Downing's A Twisted Love Story, or enjoy sexy thrillers, or those which explore complicated dynamics between couples, like B.A. Paris's Behind Closed Doors, or The Wife Between Us by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Peckenham. I think those who enjoy, domestic noir and suburban thrillers like Shari LaPena and, say, Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I think fans of Hitchcock movies, definitely, as I've tried to get that stylish, classy energy into the book, and also to try and get some quite stylish and classy locations in the book, because although it begins in the suburbs, later in the book it shifts to a big sequence on the French Riviera. And I also think that readers of book club fiction could really enjoy it, because the controversial themes and the moral issues that I explore could result in some really interesting discussions.
Well, book clubs will definitely make hay with this book, that is for sure. Lily, thank you so much. This has been a delight. And now back to you, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Lily, if you want to reveal your real name in the chat later, we'll be very receptive to that. Thank you. This book it's a page turner. You've got to read it. Right. And the through line with our next book is that Isabel Banta, the author of Honey, is also a publishing person, book publishing person. So she's employed as, I think, a senior publicist at HarperCollins. So amazing that, she found in her spare time to write such a remarkable book that kind of reminds me, it has a kind of Daisy Jones flavor to it. I really liked that Emma Straub said of the book, it's a sexy swagger of a debut. Couldn't be more intriguing than that. I then, opened the book, couldn't stop turning the pages. So for those of you who love, a kind of coming of age story, but also set in the music world, this is awesome. My favorite quote from the book is from one of the characters named Axel, a Scandinavian musician that Amber, the main character, will collaborate with. He says, "I think a good song is like an affair. It lingers long after it's over." I just love that. Okay, so Isabel Banta is a writer, book publicist, and indie bookseller based in Brooklyn. She graduated from the University of Virginia. Honey is her debut. Ryan Doherty is VP editorial director at Celadon, which was founded by my good friend Jamie Rabb and her cohort, Deb Futter, who is now the president and publisher of Celadon. Really doing great stuff. Prior to joining Macmillan, he was the vice president of literary development for Sony Pictures Entertainment, focusing on books to film and TV. So over to you guys. I'm so excited about this book. I mean, it's appealing on so many different levels. It's going to be a...
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, how are you? Sorry, Lee just quickly jumped out, but thank you,
I said
Lee.
It's going to be a huge hit.
Okay, good. I thought you were going to say that.
Nice.
That was the last thing I said. I was trying to get out of your room quickly. So
yeah, well, we didn't want to lose that sentiment. Thank you, Lee, and thank you to all you amazing booksellers and librarians out there. Isabel Banta is one of you. She is a bookseller and publicist. She's a bookseller at Books Are Magic in Brooklyn, New York. And so, Belle, congratulations. It's almost honey time. To kick this off, can you just tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm so honored to be here just because obviously what I do is I talk about books all the time, and that's really exciting. So surreal to talk about my own, and these all sound incredible. Yeah, so Honey kind of will take you back right to 1997 at the start, right before the music industry is about to change forever. There's, CDs are about to skyrocket. Everyone's about to go watch TRL after school. And Amber is, she's very ambitious and she wants, to escape her small town, and she ends up in a girl group, and her best friend is leaving to do a solo career, and she has to decide if she's going to do the same. So that's kind of really where the story opens, and you follow her career and really as she grows up and discovers what she wants. And really my goal with this book was just to give these women interiority that really hasn't been given to them. I think they have been so flattened, especially by the tabloids, and they deserve that introspection, and they deserve, to make mistakes and to grow up at a time like this when the media was very cruel to these girls who were just trying to grow up. I think kind of is the main thing I'm hoping to push against with this book.
Yes, in the setting, this 90s pop star setting is just so singular, and everybody kind of brings their own experiences with that time period. How did you land on 90s pop? It feels so unique to me, and I would love to know how you ended up there.
Well, I think there's so many different reasons. I feel like this era is so hypocritical, and that's why it's interesting to me, because feminism and girl power and the Spice Girls, that was all very present, but at the same time there was so much misogyny, and there was it was very hard to be a woman in this time. So I think that kind of the sheen of it, and but with that kind of darker underbelly kind of underlying it, and the fact that there wasn't a lot of kind of understanding of what these women were going through, I think really interested me. But the character, I think, of Amber came first because I really wanted to tell a story about this girl who's growing up and she doesn't know who she is, and she's constantly being told who she is. And then I thought this is the best time to put it in, because this is really when she would struggle the most with that, because I think the public persona versus who she is there's such a dichotomy between those two things. So I think that's what really drew me to the 90s, first reason. And then also technology at this time, right? Like everyone's on AOL, everyone's starting to get cell phones for the first time. They're starting to use computers, and CDs are kind of at their height. And really, like, I think with the Backstreet Boys, like CDs were like, they sold the most ever. And then we went into MP3s, and the record industry hasn't been the same since. So this to me felt like such an amazing time for music, because you have these massive music video budgets, you have these like insane tours, and I feel like it's never going to be that way again. So a lot of reasons, but I just think it's a really special time, and researching it was amazing, and I hope these characters, really jump off the page. And I think my goal was to make everything kind of the backdrop familiar, but kind of populated with all of these new characters.
And the book is a ton of fun to read. It's page turning, as Lee had said, but it's got a depth to it. And I think that depth is between Amber, your protagonist, and her relationships. Could you speak about Amber, how you came to her, and then kind of introduce us to Gwen and the kind of dynamic they have in the book?
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by girlhood and kind of that stage in someone's life. And I think Amber is somebody who's very porous. And as I said, I feel like she's really told who she is before she understands that herself. And that's kind of how I see her, is someone who looks outward all the time for validation and, respect for herself. And I think her arc is really trying to figure out how she even views herself after she's been told all these things about her. So I really was just interested in what that does to someone's sense of self and their, relationship to their own sexuality. And Amber's been kind of over-sexualized since she was pretty much a child. So she kind of has to reckon with that and how, she defines it for herself, which obviously I think, takes an entire book to figure out. But yeah, I think she's really driven by her own insecurities, but at the same time, she's very open, yet being open, I think, also means you can get hurt in like in turn. So that's kind of how I view her. And I think there's three main pop stars kind of at the center of this book. And I had so much fun because I was writing music for two of them. And I kind of had to think like, okay, how would all of these pop stars, be marketed? And then how would it be different underneath, and their actual personalities be completely different to that persona? So Amber obviously is the protagonist, but then there's Savannah, who is also a very, talented pop star at the time. And then Amber's best friend, Gwen. So Gwen, and I think when I'm writing characters, I'm really most interested in people who see the world differently. And Gwen and Amber see the world very differently. And their, kind of relationship to fame is super different as well. So Gwen, I think people would think she's maybe cold, and she's kind of scared about how she would be perceived by others. So she puts up a front, whereas Amber, as I said, is very porous and open and kind of searching for love all the time. And I think Gwen is very much take me or leave me, but their arcs are very different in the sense that I think Gwen thinks she knows what she wants and learns that she's been wrong the entire time. And I think Amber is more of just in discovery the entire book. So they are best friends. And I wanted to do that because this time you would always hear about fights between women. And I was interested actually more in having them actually be friends and, having them kind of lean on each other in this time, but also have the industry pitting them against each other and, them kind of struggling with that. So that was really interesting to me. And I know with me and my best friends were also different. And so I really wanted to see like, okay, Gwen would react this way, Amber would react another way, and how would that kind of change over time? But yeah, oh, you go.
You're kind of bearing a little bit of the conflict between Amber and Gwen, and which is leading me to my next question. Lee mentioned that Emma Straub called Honey a sexy swagger of a novel, and so there's a little bit of a love triangle here. Can you introduce us to the other pop star, the male pop star that's in your book as well?
Yeah, and it's funny because the triangle might become it might become another shape, like maybe a rhombus or like a hexagon, who knows? There's a lot of characters, but yeah, I think so. Wes is also introduced pretty early on. He is a boy bander, and boy band is ETA, of course, because it had to be kind of like that. But he meets Amber when they're young, and then they kind of meet again later on. But what interests me about Wes is he's actually not the star of this boy band. I feel like he probably wishes he was, and that's kind of a huge aspect of his character, that he is also very ambitious, but he kind of, I think, is insecure in his own way, and therefore thinks his relationships with other people reflect on him in turn. So, and I empathize with him too, because I think, and I hope he's really three-dimensional as well, because I think boy banders, had their own stuff going on, in terms of how I think a lot of their sexuality was kind of negated so that they could be kind of an everyman for women, I think. So he, is someone who I think has a lot of, internal conflict as well. But with him and Amber, I think a huge part of a coming of age novel is realizing if you like the idea of someone or if you like, the person in actuality. And I think so to me, that is a huge aspect of Wes's character. But I hope he's really three-dimensional too, as I said.
For sure.
Yeah.
And last question. The book is full of lyrics, Wikipedia pages, teen pop quizzes. Just give us a brief, how did you research this book? And is there anything that's
what I want to know is like, what were the concerts you attended?
Yeah, okay. That's part of the research question. There you go.
Oh my gosh. Well, I did so much research for this book. And a lot of it was actually, I watched a ton of behind the scenes tour documentaries of people touring, which was really interesting. I read a lot just kind of about the music industry in general, which was so interesting because obviously actually a lot of the pop stars at the time were not writing their music. It was producers mostly actually in Sweden. So if you didn't know that, most of this music was written, a lot of it at this studio named Cheiron in Stockholm. So they did Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney, all of those songs. And that's why a lot of the kind of lyrics don't really make sense. Like if you listen to I Want It That Way, it doesn't really make sense. They wanted to change it to make sense and then realized that the lyrics sounded better the other way. So they changed it back. And like Hit Me Baby One More Time the Swedes thought it meant to call someone up, all that stuff. So
that's really funny.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that that was really accurate in terms of the industry, and watched a lot of producers working on YouTube just to make sure I got it right.
Great job, you guys. I mean, just amazing. For anyone who loves music and fiction, and who doesn't, wow, this book is just great. Kudos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Have a good night. And stay on, please. All right, so next up is Swift River by Essie Chambers. Her editor is the Simon & Schuster editor, Karina Gooderman. You know, I don't know, there's just like so many ways in which this panel tonight, and I had nothing to do with choosing these authors, but it's just so organic and wonderful and so representative. And, you know, I just think that Robin, Michael, and the whole Pub Lunch team did an amazing job. Anyway, so Swift River already has blurbs by Paul Beatty, Ann Napolitano, Nicole Dennis-Benn. You can't get better than that. Also, the author, Essie, has worked with the Obamas and Spike Lee. Okay, you know, like you could just rest there. She was shortlisted for an Oscar, and her editor compares her work to Jackie Woodson and Britt Bennett, you know, Britt Bennett. So again, you can't really do better than that. These really unforgettable characters are set in New England. The author went to MacDowell. You know, she could have, I guess, just stayed in Hollywood land or whatever, but she did her due diligence. And she created this amazing character, Diamond Newberry. And Diamond represents prejudice, loss, the only Black person in the entire town. And I don't know, it's just so vibrant, so vital. I'm so pleased that these, you know, books are coming to the fore. So I'm going to get off and let the editor and author talk.
Thank you so much for that, Lee. And thank you everyone for being here. I know it's late on whatever day of the week it is, I'm not sure. And Essie, thank you for joining me, and thanks for writing this beautiful novel.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
Me too. I feel like I'm not supposed to say this, but I will. This is truly the book I have been waiting my entire career to publish. I actually got it on the day I was moving apartments. Normally, you know, pretty chaotic. I figured I'd read the first page, and I didn't stop. And I kept reading, not just because I was trying to get out of moving. It's just this book sort of grabbed me and did not let me go. But, you know, you don't have to take it from me. As Lee mentioned, we have some stellar blurbs in. Paul Beatty says it is a sensational debut. Ann Napolitano said, this book broke my heart and offered me hope. And Nicole Dennis-Benn said, this is the book we all need to revive our souls. Great words of praise, obviously. And so the novel, it's both sort of an intimate and epic book at once. It's at once a coming of age story about one girl's coming of age over a single summer in the 1980s. And it's a sweeping story that tells the story of multiple generations of her family going back to the start of the 20th century. The book is tender, it's occasionally very funny, and it's also a heartbreaking look at an overlooked part of our country's racist history. And in Diamond Newberry, Essie has truly created one of the most unforgettable protagonists I've read in years. But enough from me, Essie. I'd love, can you just sort of give us the broad strokes of the story?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That was such a beautiful introduction. So the story starts the summer of 1987. Diamond is a 16-year-old girl, and she's living with her mom in a small, sort of crumbling New England mill town. They are plagued by small town rumors and gossip, and just very isolated by all the ways that they stand out. Diamond is biracial, and her mom is white. Diamond is teased relentlessly about her weight, and neither one of them drives, so they hitchhike everywhere they go. And ever since Diamond's dad disappeared 7 years prior, Diamond, as Lee said, has been the only person of color in all of Swift River. This is the summer that's going to change everything for them. Diamond's mother is finally going to get her dad declared legally dead so that they can collect his insurance money, which is key because they're in a really desperate financial situation. And Diamond is learning to drive in secret, so she can escape this town and escape the kind of like looming mystery of, you know, what really happened to her dad. She then gets a letter from a relative that she's never met on her dad's side, and it starts a correspondence that reveals a hidden part of Swift River that she discovers she is personally connected to. I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that. Makes me want to read it all over again. And so I know many of us sort of roll our eyes at the assumption that fiction is inherently autobiographical, but I also do know that, you know, Swift River was partially at least inspired by your own upbringing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the beating heart of this novel is really about the experience of being the only one in a world where you don't look like anyone else. And that was my growing up experience. I was raised in a small town in Western Massachusetts that was predominantly white. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those class pictures where, you know, it's sort of a sea of white faces and then a brown face in the middle of the sea. And, you know, so I was the brown face in the sea. I had a lot of friends. I had wonderful friends that I'm still very connected to. But, you know, my family did feel a kind of an isolation that came from being different and you know, not having access on a daily basis to Black culture and Black people. So, you know, we experienced racism. Most confusing to me, I think, was a more subtle kind that you know, came from people I loved or depended on in some kind of way. Kind of like small daily wounds that were really insidious and made me question myself in a way that was really disorienting. So again, you know, story, characters all made up, but that was the emotion that I really tapped into and the kind of like the engine underneath it. For Diamond, it was, you know, what does it mean to love people who hurt you in a way that you can't really name and don't talk about? And, you know, what does it mean for Diamond to form an identity in that kind of environment? When I was in it, I didn't really have language for it. So this is really me giving words, you know, and story to a feeling that I can now identify and really embrace.
Right. So you did use, you know, a lot of your sort of personal experience and some really hard things sort of as the inspiration for this book. But I know it's not all, you know, based on personal experience. And you also did a lot of extensive research. And I know you did a lot of research on something called sundown towns. Can you tell us what those are and sort of where that research led you?
Yeah, sure. So when I started doing research for the book, I was really looking for a family history for Diamond's father. And I was trying to find out as much as I could about Black communities in rural New England in the early 20th century. I wasn't finding a lot. I was already familiar with the sundown towns that you mentioned, which is it's an all-white town created using racist laws and harassment and violence and sort of like terrorism to essentially keep Black people out. The name itself came from the practice of allowing some Black people to pass through during the day, but a sign would warn them that if they weren't out by the time that the sun set, they could be hurt or killed. And, you know, sometimes that sign was even right next to the welcome sign of the town. I came across a book called Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism. It was written by a man named Dr. James Lowen. Blew my mind open. I had really thought that this was primarily a Southern phenomenon, and I was surprised to learn the opposite, that this was, you know, mostly in, you know, the North and the West and the Northwest. I mean, it was essentially, this was a Northern thing, in part in response to the Great Migration. So, you know, curfews and laws restricting where Black people were allowed to live that's been around for centuries. But in the late 19th century, all the way through 1968, thousands of these towns were established. There were like entire states that were mostly made up of sundown towns, I discovered. One thing jumped out in my reading. Sometimes there was an exception that was made for one or two Black people if they were live-in servants or they were seen to be providing some kind of essential function. And I knew I was going to make Swift River a sundown town. And I was going to make Diamond a descendant of the one person that was allowed to stay after the Black community was violently chased out. So the research cracked the book wide open for me.
Right. And you also, you found out something about your own.
Yeah, I did. I found out through Dr. Lowen, who created this database, that the town next to where I grew up is thought to have been a sundown town, which explains
in the north.
things.
Yeah, because I'd heard of sundown towns and sort of knew what they were, but I had not realized that they were more northern phenomenon.
Yeah.
That's fascinating and also horrifying.
Yeah.
And you're so good at at uncovering these sort of hidden histories. And I know you've done a lot of that in sort of your other career in film and TV. So this is your first novel, but you've worked on both sort of serious documentaries, most recently Descendant, directed by Margaret Brown, executive produced by the Obamas. And you also have worked on dramas and comedies for teens and kids. So I'm curious as to how those experiences sort of shaped the writing of this book.
Yeah, sure. So I would say, just on a very basic level, I think spending so many years creating for visual mediums has meant that I lean more on the part of myself that is visually driven in my writing. I think, like many writers, I often see an image first. And one of the first story kernels for Swift River, there were many kernels, but one of the first was an image that popped into my head of Diamond and Ma on the side of the road. And I didn't know who they were. And I just sort of wrote to that. But I would say, more specific to the kinds of stories that I like to tell as it relates to my experience, my work in docs, I think, speaks to the part of me that is like you said, is drawn to untold stories in American history. And you mentioned that I spent a lot of time telling stories for teens and young adults in TV and film. I worked for a Nickelodeon network called The N. We made shows like Miracle's Boys, which was a Jacqueline Woodson adaptation, and Degrassi and South of Nowhere. And Swift River is not YA, but I do love telling stories about this moment in life. I feel like it's such a rich place to draw from. We've all felt that pain and exhilaration of being a teenager, where your body is out of control, your emotions are out of control. And like once a week, it's also the best day of your life. Everything feels like the beginning and the end of the world. So it's also why I wanted Diamond's present day story to take place over the course of one single summer, so that we could make small moves through her world and really feel the bigness of feeling, driver's ed and first friendships and fighting with your mom and, that hot, sticky summer feeling of just wanting to be seen and loved and crushed on. Especially because there are a lot of heavier layers to the novel that span generations.
Right. And last question, and you led me right to it. Just quickly. So as you said, this is a book about serious themes, real serious, weighty history, but also there's a lightness, a levity to it. So how, or sort of what made you decide to strike that balance between the dark and light?
Well, yeah, first I would say, I think you and I really bonded over our shared love of dark and funny and weird. That's my personal taste. I have a dark sense of humor, and I love finding comedy in discomfort and embarrassment. And there's sort of nothing more embarrassing or uncomfortable than being a teenager. I also just think that's how we experience life. Joy and pain live very closely together for all of us. And as I was writing the book, I was caring for my dad, who had Alzheimer's, and I was sort of losing him very slowly. It was sad, but he was hysterical, and we laughed constantly, in the most inappropriate places, in kind of terrifying situations. And I really feel like I poured that spirit and, into the story and also the process of writing the story, because I knew that I wanted to write about very painful things in the world. And I sort of created Diamond as a weird, insightful, hopefully sometimes funny filter for that. Not necessarily to filter out pain or dilute it, but to kind of give the reader, hopefully, an experience of a full range of emotions on a single page.
Yep, and I think you definitely achieved that. I mean, I know in one page I'll be sort of laughing and then almost crying the next. So big congratulations to you, and thanks so much for speaking to me. I know over to you, Lee.
Thank you.
I mean, you guys are amazing. I just want to ask one more question of you.
Sure.
So when it came over the transom, I'm like, was it through you said that this was the manuscript you've been waiting for a long time, Carrie.
Oh, Karina, you still there?
Sorry. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's amazing. I mean,
yeah.
that relationship, that dynamic between author and editor.
Oh, I did not, to be clear, I didn't know about, it's just like, it feels like this is the one that has, I'm like, this is why I have this job. I hadn't, it hadn't been teased to me or anything, but
total passion.
I was like, yeah, as soon as I started reading, it was like, and this, that best feeling of
feeling of being in love.
Exactly. Yep. And it's a really good reminder, when we're sending a million emails and not that Zooms aren't fun, but
we're so lucky to do what we do. We really, really are.
Yeah.
Thanks to you both. And moving on to, bye guys. All right, Freedom is a Feast by Alejandro Puyana. Hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Some of the editors tonight I've known, some I haven't. I know Ben George. We worked together on an Oprah's Book Club pick. And this book, again, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's pretty extraordinary the way it combines this kind of narrative drive and love of each word, every sentence, with a political point of view, from Venezuela, which has experienced so many ups and downs, upheavals, some of them, probably motivated by our country. And, so the read is just extraordinary. I'll read what my script says, and it's important. Alejandro emigrated to the United States from Venezuela at the age of 26. He received his MFA from the Missioner Center at the University of Texas in Austin. His fiction has appeared in many, many publications. Ben is executive editor at Little Brown, where he acquires literary fiction and narrative nonfiction, as well as biography and memoir. Okay, so what I'll say is that the author's father started a newspaper with one of the country's prominent leftist thinkers. And that's in an author's note. And this was at a time when Hugo Chavez was running for president. The main character in the book is based on Teodoro Petkoff, a close family friend, and he inspired the character Stanislavo. So our author, Alejandro, left Caracas in 2006 for Austin, started writing the novel in 2012, unfortunately after his brother was kidnapped and held hostage by 4 men. Everything about this just grabs me. And so, last but not least, this amazing, 2 people and this amazing book. Ben, Alejandro, congratulations, and I'll get off stage.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. So good to see you again. Thanks, everyone, for your patience tonight at the end of a long but wonderful evening. Lee, you mentioned Oprah there. I can use that to sort of hold up the book and try to do an imitation of her because the title so lends itself to it. Freedom is a feast. So I'm nominating.
You're doing a good job, Ben.
Thank you. I'm nominating it for the Ben George Book Club. Less influential than Miss Winfrey's, but no less enthusiastic, and I hope you all will join me in reading and loving this novel, which everyone at Little Brown swooned for. But I have to give special credit to our publisher, Bruce Nichols, who cleverly christened it "For Whom the Venezuelan Bell Tolls," which will give you a sense of the fantastic ambition here. It's a novel about all the big themes: love and revolution, life and death, the ravages of time, and a chance at redemption before it's too late. It's set in Venezuela over the course of 50 years. It's a classic story of star-crossed lovers who meet as guerrilla fighters in the jungle. One of them well off and from the intelligentsia, the other indigenous and a nurse. And we follow them as fateful decisions they make in the crucible of a revolution chase them down through time. The novel asks some huge questions. What does it mean to sacrifice everything, including your family, for your ideals? What does it mean to regret the irrevocable? And if offered a late life chance at forgiveness and atonement by saving the grandson you never knew you had, would you take it? The novel has some high-profile early fans, and the word master keeps coming up. Luis Alberto Urrea calls Alejandro the new master. Amy Hempel says he's already a master storyteller. I couldn't agree more, of course, but always the thing for me with this novel, Alejandro, is there's just so much life here. We go from the steamy coastal jungles to the teeming barrios of Caracas, and so much life stuffed in these pages that I sometimes am half expecting a shark empanada to tumble out of it. So Lee referenced, you grew up in Venezuela, you came to the US in your 20s, and I know this novel started for you with a very personal and traumatic event, which was the kidnapping of your brother. And I wonder if you can talk about that a bit and how the novel developed for you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, so much. Yeah, the year was 2012. I had already been living in Austin for a few years. And I received a phone call from my father one evening. It's the type of phone call you never want to get. It always starts with, "Everyone's okay, don't worry about it, but," and then that big but that hangs there. And yeah, my brother had been kidnapped, had been held hostage for many hours by that point. He was already safe when my parents called me. But yeah, he was held hostage for many hours. And in that time, later when I talked to him, he told me the story of what had happened. And in the middle of all the sort of horrific things about kind of getting beat up and not knowing if he was going to die or live, there was one part of the story that really surprised me and then haunted me for many years after that. And it was that when they were trying to convince the 3 men that kidnapped them, to turn themselves in, my brother sat with one of them and they talked for a long time. And the man apologized profusely to my brother. He said that he was never in this life, that he had been there because his best friend had asked him a favor. He was the only one that had a car. His best friend needed a car. And you know, he was kind of roped into it. And I felt so angry at these people. But I also felt a tremendous sense of empathy towards him. Not only because of what he had said to my brother, but because I knew that the circumstances of our country, of Venezuela, made it so difficult for people to survive and to subsist in a decent way. So for many years, I didn't actually touch that story. I didn't write about it for many years after 2012. But at some point, I wanted to write about it. And I started writing that scene about a kidnapping from the point of view of this young man who kind of gets roped into this event. And that scene now is in the novel, pretty much unchanged from when I first wrote it.
Love hearing about the seed for the novel. and then how it was with you for a while and then started growing and becoming more ambitious. And eventually it was adding time periods, characters, and so on. And I'm curious how the rest of the characters came to you and when or how you realized that you'd be telling this big story from several points of view.
Yeah, well, the first thing was that I knew I didn't want to start the novel with the kidnapping, because I didn't want to start it in sort of in the worst moment of this character's life, when he makes his worst decision. It didn't feel fair for the character to start in at that point. So that led me to his childhood. I wanted to start early, which logically led me to that character's mother, Eloy's mother, Maria. So then it started to expand from there. I think the novel, it was obvious very, very early that it was going to be a political book, because in Venezuela, it's not optional to be political in the last 30 or so years, arguably before that. It's one of those places in the world where just the political infiltrates the personal, and it's undistinguishable. That's everything you talk about. At some points, it's even a means of survival. I mean, if you weren't a part of a specific party, you wouldn't get paid every month, you wouldn't have access to food. So the political was just intrinsic to everyone. So then it started to expand from there. I mean, I think I wanted to tell the story of the rise of the left, which led me to the 1960s, which led me to Stanislavo, inspired by Teodoro Pekov, a close family friend who was a revolutionary who escaped prison 3 times and became a presidential candidate, and then a journalist in opposition of Chavez, even though he was a leftist man his whole life. So yeah, it just became this political book, and I knew I needed to hit certain important moments of Venezuelan history, like the Chavez election, like the coup that briefly deposed him in 2002. And it's sort of the perfect bookend for the book then became Chavez's death in 2012, 13. So this family sort of has to traverse the complicated history of the country, and we get to experience the life of the country through them and through their troubles.
I love what you say about the characters cannot escape the political, because that was one of the first things that I and many other people at Little Brown felt. You don't have a choice. These geopolitical forces are acting on you, whether you want them to be or not. To me, the aura of Isabel Allende presides over the novel like a patron saint. I'm curious what writers or books were influences or touchstones for you with the novel, and what tradition do you see yourself writing toward or out of?
Yeah, Isabel Allende obviously was one of the big ones. Before I get to her, though, I wouldn't be honestly talking about influences if I didn't talk about the books that I loved growing up, which were Lord of the Rings and the Dragonlance trilogies. And I think there is a lineage to that just in terms of scope. I've always been really interested about big stories with high stakes and bigger than life characters. But yeah, as a teenager, I started to read a lot of Latin American authors, obviously growing up in Venezuela. Julio Cortázar was a huge influence. I think the first time I ever read Highway to the South, one of his most famous short stories, it kind of changed the way I thought about writing. But I do feel a special kinship with Isabel Allende for many reasons. First, the way that she wrote politics into her books was an inspiration. I think The House of Spirits is similar in my book in that regard, where you can really experience what Chile was going through in that book, and the political is interfering with every character there. Her memoir, Paula, also did the same thing. And one of the things that really touched me and about Isabel's story is that she wrote The House of Spirits from diaspora when she was living in Venezuela. When she escaped Chile after her uncle Salvador Allende was assassinated, she moved to Venezuela. Venezuela at that point was a country that received immigrants. It never exported them. And Isabel was able to write about her home from Venezuela. And I feel the same way writing from the United States about my home. I feel like I probably wouldn't be a writer if I hadn't left. The sense of guilt for having left family behind, for not raising my own family in the country really pushed me towards being a writer.
Apologies that I'm a little dark here. I'm in this room where the automated light went off, but I'm I'm okay, and it looks like you all can still see me. Two just brief questions here. Moving from this political to the personal, so much about parents and children in this novel, and in the later stages of editing and revising, you became a father yourself, and that material was already so rich, but I sensed almost this new wisdom and depth of feeling around that stuff coming into all the scenes as you were polishing them. And just curious if you felt any different relationship to the book when you became a dad.
Yeah, no, of course. I think everybody that's a parent, that has been a parent in this conversation, knows that all the cliches kind of are true. When you become a father or a mother, your life changes, and there's this level of love and care that you just can't access before that happens. And so yeah, you know very well, Ben, that pretty much every scene that is between a parent and their offspring in this novel has changed since Ona was born. It has become deeper, richer, more emotional. And as Ona is 5 months old, so, and as she grows, it just becomes even more powerful.
I love hearing that. And then just one quick thing. I know that writers often don't want to know where a novel's going, how it's going to end, because they like to be surprised themselves as they're writing. And just curious if, as you were writing, anything surprised you in how the novel progressed or ended.
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing about the novel was how hopeful it is in the end. I think at first, because the novel is so concerned with this kind of oppression that the country sort of pushes on its characters, like a dark ending could have been a very easy place to end. But these characters, this family, was hoping to find refuge in each other. And I was really surprised that by the end of the book, they find that peace, they find that love that unites them. And I'm so glad that the novel ended where it was. It just feels like there's a sense of hope that carries the work even through sort of the dark times. And I'm very proud of that.
Me too. I love that. And it's just brilliant and beautiful how you turn it to that. So one more time, freedom is a feast. Thank you so much, Robin and Publishers Lunch. And thank you, Lee, for such a brilliant job emceeing this tonight.
Well, you know, I am in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
No, not at all. In Maplewood, New Jersey. And Ben, you're a brilliant editor and you have amazing taste, as do the other editors on this panel and their authors. Thank you. And I guess I'll only say that I've been in this business for a long time in one way or the other, and it never gets old. You know, it's just extraordinary the way these 5 authors, these 5 editors tonight just light up our worlds. And, you know, I couldn't be more honored to have moderated this. So thanks to Michael, Robin, Publishers Lunch, all the publishers, editors, authors, etc. But, you know, just keep reading, keep writing. Love you all. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.